Right now, everyone is aware of the scandal involving one of Mr. Beast's friends that happened about a year ago. This friend is Kris Tyson, a longtime friend of Jimmy, with whom he has been close for a very long time, and with whom he has filmed most of their videos. Kris is an integral part of the Mr. Beast channel, and many videos were enriched by his presence. Kris was a model family man. He had a son, and everyone was very happy for him. Then, about a year ago, he announced that he is transgender. This wasn't entirely surprising considering that, over time, it was noticeable that he painted his nails and did other similar things, so it wasn't shocking news. A popular YouTuber who makes documentary videos about YouTube drama made a video about how Kris Tyson would ruin Mr. Beast's career. This video was heavily criticized because SunnyV2, the YouTuber, suggested that since Kris is now transgender, a gender often protected in media spaces, he essentially became unfireable. SunnyV2 explained that if there were any disagreements between Mr. Beast and Kris, and Mr. Beast decided to fire him, people would likely accuse Mr. Beast of being transphobic. SunnyV2 received a lot of hate for these comments, being labeled a transphobe, and was criticized by many large YouTubers who said his remarks were very inappropriate. In response, SunnyV2 did not go on streams to apologize, nor did he make apology videos. He simply ignored it and continued making videos. His channel still exists and thrives today. Mr. Beast responded by saying that the situation was becoming absurd and that Kris is not his nightmare but his friend, and the transphobia was starting to irritate him. The situation basically ended there, and while people criticized Kris, most people honestly didn't care. Fast forward to a few days ago, after the incident with Dr. Disrespect, it turns out that things you did 8 or 9 years ago with minors still matter, at least to those who want to ruin your career. Kris's case is a bit more interesting because what was dug up about him wasn't in private messages. It was quite public and could be found by anyone on Twitter. Older people might know this, but younger ones probably haven't encountered it. There is an artist named Shadman. Shadman drew 18+ content, which was often unpleasant, politically incorrect, and generally seen as dark humor because it was so audacious. Some of his work included depictions of characters who were clearly not 18. In Japanese anime culture, this is called. Whether this is legal or equivalent to distributing content depends on the country you live in, but in America, it wasn't taken too seriously. At one point, Shadman was a symbol of counterculture, a sort of punk who drew whatever he wanted without caring about the consequences. There were memes like, "Oh no, it's a Shadman drawing, get it away from me," but it was a simpler time on the internet. During that period, you probably know of Keemstar, a cornerstone of the internet, who likes to dive into drama. Many people strongly dislike him. Shadman didn't like Keemstar either, and at that time, Keemstar had an 8-year-old daughter. As a dark joke, again, it was a different era, Shadman drew his daughter in his style. There was nothing explicit, but the depiction of an 8-year-old girl in such a manner crossed a line. That was enough for many YouTubers at the time to reach out to Shadman saying, "Dude, this crosses all boundaries." But for most internet trolls, it was just another joke, including for Kris Tyson, who really liked Shadman. During one of his streams, Kris even accidentally showed Shadman's website, but quickly hid it. It all started on July 23rd when Keemstar posted that Kris Tyson supported Shadman, who drew his 8-year-old daughter, in that way. Everyone knows this fact, and personally, Kris Tyson and I discussed it about a month ago, and it still bothers me. This is not misinformation, it's a fact. From this point on, it became chaotic. Many people started claiming things that weren't true, some misunderstood the message, and some deliberately spread misinformation. From what I found, the situation was roughly as follows. Kris genuinely enjoyed Shadman's work and did not hide it, constantly posting about it on Twitter, ordering art from him, and so on. But Keemstar's wording was misleading, implying that Kris supported Shadman specifically for drawing his daughter. In reality, Kris just supported the artist who independently drew his daughter. Kris did not push for Keemstar's daughter to be drawn and did not publicly endorse it. However, he did order one drawing from Shadman, which he hung in his room, depicting a modern Zoomer girl who was underage in the artwork. While not explicit, it was still quite gross. This drawing appears in one of Mr. Beast's old videos. It's important to understand that Mr. Beast wasn't as politically correct or family-friendly back then as he became later when his popularity grew. However, internet tabloids ran with the story that Kris had ordered a drawing of Keemstar's daughter and hung it on his wall, which was entirely false. Yet, his association with Shadman, which lasted at least until 2019 when Kris begged him to draw a character from S.H.I.E.L.D. Hero, is still heavily criticized. That concludes the story with Shadman, but make no mistake, Shadman is still a piece of human garbage. If you know his life story, You understand what I mean. Okay, but if there's one thing we can take away from this story, it's that Kris has an addiction to explicit drawn content, which he openly loves. We all know the memes like, "My member took me to places I wouldn't go with a gun." But if you're a public figure or planning to become one and have tons of tweets about loving such art with minors, it might be wise to delete them. In the future, it could become a problem, and it did. For now, it's just an association with Shadman and drawn pictures, so let's move on to more serious matters. This girl acted in the show iCarly on Nickelodeon. Her name is Jeanette McCurdy. At some point, explicit photos of her leaked online. The guys, I mean the directors and producers at Nickelodeon, turned out to be, you know what. It's a long story, and Nickelodeon was a hotbed of creeps, which is too long to recall now. But back then, these photos were all over the internet, shared as a joke. An old video from Kris Tyson's channel surfaced where he said, "It's terrible what they did to her, but if you still want to see, the photos are available at the link in the description." The internet was then filled with misinformation, claiming she was his ex, and he was spreading her photos because he took them. However, the truth is those photos were all over the internet, and he was just sharing them as a meme. He was a high schooler, and it was 2014. And again, in this case, no, it was a very stupid act. I completely agree. But again, it was a different culture, a different time, and it wasn't taken as seriously back then. He didn't expect that something posted on his small channel with a few hundred subscribers would come back to haunt him 10 years later. Okay, I understand that some of you may think I'm defending him or something, but when completely bizarre attacks start, even against people I don't particularly like, people begin to make things up or claim it's the worst thing ever, when it might just have been a foolish mistake by a teenager. Honestly, I can't muster much outrage over it. It's more about Kris Tyson's huge mistake in not foreseeing the future and not deleting everything, severing ties with shady individuals, and thus not jeopardizing Mr. Beast in the future. But now we've reached the main argument for canceling Kris Tyson and why he's leaving the Mr. Beast channel. The issue is that Kris Tyson had inappropriate interactions with a 13-year-old while he was 20 in 2016. This is a very serious accusation, similar to what happened with Dr. Disrespect. We have Snapchat messages where he discussed Belle Delphine's bathwater with a minor, and people find this inappropriate, saying it's a lewd topic unsuitable for discussion with a minor. There are also public tweets where he made jokes like, "Oh, she's hot for a 4-year-old." There are anonymous recordings of their conversations in a public Discord server, which are filled with swearing and, from what I understood, contained typical mother insults and a lot of dark humor. They also had public conversations on Twitter with strange moments, like Kris saying he'd send certain photos, but in context it seemed like jokes. The context was something like, "The first one to subscribe to my Patreon gets my photos," and the other replied, "Okay, I'm first," to which Kris responded, "All right, I'll send you the photos." In the end, the supposed victim came out and said, "Guys, nobody abused me. We talked normally. Yes, there were non-politically correct jokes, but that's all." Regarding when he was 16 and met Kris, he said, "Guys, my parents and I go to a campsite every year, and it's near where Mr. Beast films his videos. My parents brought me there, they met the whole team, I spent time with the Mr. Beast team, helped them film videos, and then my parents picked me up in the evening." According to this guy, there were no weird moves from Kris, and if they joked about something, it was mutual. Here's the thing. After the Dr. Disrespect story, the internet changed its attitude towards anything involving minors, and the scrutiny is now much higher. Now, it's enough that 8 years ago you publicly made a dirty joke in the presence of a minor. Yes, as the guy explained, in their community, Kris was called addicted, and it was their shared meme. If you think about it, in many moments he does seem like a pretty weird freak. I think many would agree. But from everything I've seen, I can't say he's some kind of is not a particularly good thing, especially when you regularly show it off. And this was enough for Kris to post the following message last night. "I would like to apologize for any of my past behavior or comments if it hurt or offended anyone. It was not my intent. Seeing recent events, we've mutually decided it's best I permanently step away from all things Mr. Beast and social media to focus on my family and mental health." And Keemstar responded to him saying, "You didn't apologize to me a month ago when I talked about your behavior supporting Shadman. What changed?" Basically, this is the standard corporate response, probably through Mr. Beast's PR department, to the accusations with apologies and a resignation statement, which we've seen hundreds of times from YouTubers. I find it somewhat amusing that they always include the part about leaving to focus on family and mental health. From my perspective, there are two views on this situation. The first is my own. Looking at these accusations, I don't see anything particularly serious that should end a person's career, compared to the case of Dr. Disrespect, who was nearly 40 when he communicated with a minor of unknown age, and we never saw the dialogues, so we could only imagine horrible things given the context. But in Kris's case, he was young, and made crude jokes that were acceptable at the time, and no one questioned them. Regarding his interactions with Shadman, many YouTubers interacted with him, thinking his work was cool, and now it seems disingenuous to accuse Kris. Many are twisting things to make it worse, like saying he whispered to a 13-year-old, when in fact, these were just normal conversations in a crowded Discord. And meeting a 16-year-old 3 years later was simply organizing a visit to Mr. Beast's set, with his parents aware of his whereabouts the entire time. The boy himself now says everything was fine. Another claim is that he paid for a drawing of Keemstar's daughter, which he wasn't connected to, and bought another drawing thinking it was cool and countercultural. Lastly, people say he leaked photos of his ex, but back then, he was a nobody and not dating a Nickelodeon star. At 17 or 18, he found it funny to share a link, thinking it was hilarious. Let's be honest. People of that generation, don't tell me your friends didn't send you weird links to sites like LiveLeak or something similar. If we judge people by today's standards for things that happened 9 or 10 years ago when we lived in a different time, no one will be left standing. Even after all this, though I find Kris foolish for not deleting this stuff, I don't see him as a pedophile or a very bad person. Foolish, irresponsible, cringeworthy, yes, but not a pedophile. However, I do have issues with the new Kris, as he left his son without a full-time father. I understand the whole identity thing, but I can't agree with or like it. But again, it's not my business. The second view is that many people, including me to some extent, support. When Dr. Disrespect was cancelled, people were satisfied with the idea of an unseen dialogue with a minor, and the left side of Twitter celebrated calling him to account. But now, with Kris, who objectively has more accusations, it seems to be more about a cultural war between the left and right. The right took down one of the left, showing that cancel culture works both ways. We have guys like Sneeko, who defended Dr. Disrespect, now going after Kris Tyson. Meanwhile, politically correct bloggers and streamers, who previously tore Dr. Disrespect apart, were silent, fearing to spoil their relationship with Mr. Beast. Recently, Mr. Beast released a video where 50 top YouTubers competed for $1 million prize. So many didn't want to ruin relations with him without an official response. But when Kris announced his departure, suddenly, YouTube was filled with videos condemning him for discussing Belle Delphine's bathwater with a 13-year-old on Snapchat. I feel that once people reach a certain level of popularity, they become just talking heads, repeating the safest opinions because it's so easy to be canceled now. Despite all this, I'm not particularly sad about Kris Tyson being canceled, as many wanted this for a long time. His public transition and appearance in Mr. Beast's videos put a huge target on his back. In the end, many will have to apologize to Sunny V2, who was right about this being a ticking time bomb for Mr. Beast. After this, Jimmy will need to be very careful about what his friends in videos do, because if people are upset about him opening 100 wells in Africa, another incident like this could be very dangerous. Former Mr. Beast employees, some of whom he didn't part with on good terms, are posting messages saying Jimmy knew everything and showing confidential documents. Keemstar confirms it's a genuine former employee. So, people are coming out of the woodwork to take down Mr. Beast while they can, hoping for a lot of attention. They're digging up old videos where he said the F word. The hunt is on, dear friends, and Keemstar teases that this is just the beginning, with more unique and interesting revelations to come. But that's for the future. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Until next time, goodbye.